We are back with another episode of the MMA Prospectus where Patrick Weidman is going to attempt to be deadly serious and straight-faced the whole time and not express extreme surprise by throwing his hands in the air and gasping. There you go.
Too
Even
late.
once.
Already
Too
too late.
late. Never gonna happen. Never gonna work. We'll never see Pat Wyman be understated or subdued. No.
Life's too short for that, man. Like if you're not going to make other people feel the same emotion that you're feeling, what's the point?
Exactly. Exactly. And if the emotions that you feel are feeling tend to all be clownish, well, that's just kind of the way it is.
Yeah, I'm a walking caricature of a human. Like that's my wheelhouse right there. That's what I'm looking for.
Indeed. So on that note, welcome back, everybody. Tom, Pat, thank you once again for joining me for our show that I still have not decided to tank and cancel in exchange for just getting drunk on my Friday evenings.
Well, what you say those things like they're mutually exclusive. Why couldn't you be drunk? Why couldn't you be getting drunk right now?
It's true. I mean, I want people to think of me as a really above board and serious professional, which is why I entered MMA writing.
Naturally, those things go together.
Yeah. So anyway, we're here to talk about MMA prospects, as always. That's always our thing. If that's news to you, then welcome to the first episode of the MMA Prospectus for whoever's watching for the first time. We're going to talk about last week's show a little for the UFC. This week's show, not a lot, because there's not a whole lot on it in terms of fighters that we're really excited about. And maybe a bit of World Series of Fighting or some other regional prospects this week, because like I say, this UFC show is kind of like, nothing too special. But first, we got a shitload to talk about from last week because a whole bunch of dudes came out and showed up. And that was the UFC Fight Night Goiania card. Pat, who was your favorite prospect performance, like I have to ask?
I mean, it's obviously Bektic, right?
Yeah.
I just thought, I mean, he went out there and he killed it. Like, the thing, Connor and I talked about this on Heavy Hands this week. I can't remember if I don't know if Connor's actually put that episode up yet or not. But I mean, he killed it. Like, we talked extensively about it, that he showed a lot of maturity beyond his years, and the way that Connor broke it down is just in that brief exchange at the start of the fight, in the 20 seconds before Bektic took him down, he had Martins' head all over the place. Like, Martins came out thinking, okay, he's going to shoot, he's going to try and take me down. Bektic drew him into a layered exchange that eventually got Martins throwing up high and opened up the counter takedown that Bektic wanted. But he didn't just go out there and try to shoot it. He did things to set it up first. He looked really comfortable in exchanges. He dropped Martins with a right hand. That's the first time I can ever remember him dropping somebody on the feet. A couple of people mentioned that they thought he looked a little bit suspect defensively, or like he got hit too much. But I mean, he got hit. Like, he really didn't get hit very much. He didn't get hit very much percentage-wise at all. Martins had a lot of trouble putting leather on him. Really subtle head movement. Like his head is never in the same place in the pocket as he's moving or as he's throwing. He's always slightly off the center line, which keeps his hips loaded and ready to come back with counters as well. I mean, his power is just disgusting. Like, he hits as hard as anybody I've ever seen, especially a featherweight. I mean, what more can you say?
Yeah, that was a fantastic performance. It was a straight-up sunning by Bektic. Top game looked outstanding still, and the work rate in that, and it was a short fight, but man, when he gets in there, he puts in 15 minutes of work. Like, he's the sort of dude that when he gets done, like, I half expect him to like go running after the fight because the guy still has so much energy left. It was, I mean, just rinse and repeat takedowns, and once that neck became available, just good night. Bektic looked absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the best I hoped for against somebody like that because Martins was somebody that can match him physically, just in like raw physical potential. Martins is a pretty great physical athlete. And I mean, it's also like, people talking about him getting hit. Martins is a high output fighter, and if you're going to open an exchange in the pocket with somebody who's willing to throw, you're going to get hit. That's not like anything big or bad. But it was showing that, like, if he's going to sit and trade with somebody who's as good an athlete, he's going to come out ahead. You know, he hits harder. He's much more fluid and much more put together in his strikes. And then, you know, he has all the rest of the game still there to round it out. It was the performance I think we'd all hoped for to see out there. Like, you couldn't ask for anything more out of him.
What really surprised me, speaking about his physicality, and like Martins is an awesome athlete. By just about any standard, Martins is an awesome athlete, and Bektic was on absolutely another level than him physically. Like, that really stood out to me. Like, that we have never seen Martins, even when he fought Edson Barboza in his UFC debut on short notice. Martins was not really physically outclassed by Barboza. Barboza was way bigger than him, but it's not like they were on that he was on a completely different level athletically. Bektic looked like he was on another level athletically, and that's saying something. That's saying something really substantial about what kind of physical talent Bektic actually is. And also just the sheer, just Bektic's sheer relentlessness. Like, you could tell Martins kept thinking, like, okay, I can ride this out. Like, he's got to stop hitting me at some point. And then Bektic just never stopped hitting him.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, pretty much everybody has to stop at some point, and Bektic just never did.
Yeah, I found out I'm using a new note system here, and I messed up my notes, but so I said stuff that I meant for another guy. What I really liked in this is how quickly Bektic is kind of adapting his game. Well, not really adapting his game, because he kind of is he started out in MMA, but how quickly he's picking up like the MMA wrestling style, where he's more than happy to advance position, but his primary focus is delivering damage and making the other guy work to get out of bad spots. So he's very happy to sit in half guard. And when you start rolling up to your stomach, he rides the crap out of you when you try to stand up and just makes you expend energy every second you're on the mat with him. And like you said, like Pat said, and it just keeps coming. He doesn't slow down. He doesn't stop. You keep thinking there's got to be an end to this. He's got to get tired eventually. He's got to stop hitting me and rest his arms at some point, and it just never comes. And and he just kind of ground Martins down in the most violent sense of like that term that we can express.
Yeah, he looks like a young GSP. I mean, how much more can you say about the guy?
Yeah, I mean, I'll put it this way: like you mentioned him riding guys when they try to get back to their feet, Tom. And I think that in kind of a broad sense, that's the response to the evolution of the metagame that we've seen. Because right when we started doing this show last September, last October, we talked a lot about the kind of evolution of takedown defense and the evolution of scrambling, and how guys are giving up their back, and guys are giving up their back as they attempt to hip out and get back to their feet. And so the response to that, on the one hand, has been guys like Chaz Skelly, who are just killers at getting to your back. Like, the second that you expose yourself at all to try and get back to your feet, a guy like Skelly is going to be on your back, and that's his response to that evolution of the metagame. With guys like Bektic or Ryan Bader or C.B. Dalloway, their response has been to turn or Anthony Johnson too will do this, or Daniel Cormier also. Their response is to just be a killer from the ride, like, to just be incredibly heavy and stay on you and keep all of their weight down on you so that you can't move, and then just blaze away, just blitz at you with their free hand, just punch you repeatedly very, very hard in the face.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think back in October, I wrote an article that kind of take a look at like the metagame of top position, and the riders are kind of like the first thing I highlighted, because I think like Cain Velasquez really led the charge on that one. Where, I mean, like, people talked about, like, I mean, do you remember this discussion where people talked about him having pillow hands because, like, he had to hit guys so many times to put them away? But, I mean, what we really were seeing was this idea of pressure and volume striking on the ground as guys tried to use the cage or to fight back to their feet. And it's becoming, like, a standard tool now in a lot of guys' arsenals. And it's either guys do that or we kind of saw Charles Oliveira. He started working some more offensive wrestling into his game, and it has led to his front headlock game becoming a much bigger part of his offensive arsenal. And that's like the other side of it, or where you're dealing with guys who stand up. You got guys who play for that. You got guys who go for the back. You got guys who ride, and then you got guys who attack the front headlock chokes. And Bektic clearly has kind of his base game already set, which is really exciting to see. Because, like I think Zane said, I mean, he looks like a young GSP, but he looks like GSP after GSP kind of figured out what MMA game he was playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean the kind of to tie those different threads together. That's part of what makes Chris Weidman such a dominating ground fighter, right? Is that he does all of those things. He's got the really highly developed front headlock game, but then he's also got that riding game as well. So like Lyoto Machida, when he fought Weidman, was ready to get back to his feet. He was perfectly ready to scramble and do all that stuff. And Weidman completely shut him down with a simple top ride. Like that Machida wasn't ready for that. And I think a lot of guys who come from a more or less pure jiu-jitsu background in terms of their training have no answer to that. That I don't think that most schools of thought in jiu-jitsu provide a really good set of answers to a top ride.
I mean, the answer in a jiu-jitsu format is don't be there. Like, don't, like, instead of getting to your knees, go to your guard. I mean, and that's, so a lot of guys, yeah, when jiu-jitsu guys get stuck there, they don't like it. And they expect you to take their back. Like, a lot of, the turtle's becoming more and more of a position that you'll see played in, like, from the top in high-level jiu-jitsu. More guys are attacking for crucifixes and things like that. But for the most part, if a guy in the jiu-jitsu context, the point system rewards people taking the back from there. So there aren't a ton of like really heavy riders in jiu-jitsu. So it is a position that guys are unfamiliar with, but in a lot of situations, you'll see a lot of guys kind of roll to guard. But man, you get a good wrestler in there who like knows how to kind of control a guy and keep a guy in that ride so he can't roll out, and it's a really uncomfortable position for, as you said, for a jiu-jitsu guy, because they don't spend a ton of time there.
Well, okay, we can't just talk about Bektic all show. I hate to say it. We could.
Disagree.
Okay. But let's talk about the two other prospects that put on almost, but not quite as good performances, Tom Breeze and Alex Oliveira.
Well, Alex Oliveira was actually the guy I was talking about when I was talking about the rinse and repeat slamming. Didn't want to spend too much time with Nunes at range with Nunes. Eventually got his back standing, and then from there it was picking up Nunes and putting him down until Nunes got tired. And then the transition to the back and the choke were just so quick. It was really, really nice showing from Oliveira, just kind of understanding how he was going to get a much more experienced fighter out of the cage as quickly as possible, and just kind of how to bring his physical tools into like the most like into play as best he could. Nunes was way too content to kind of sit there with Oliveira having a body lock, and it may not be a fact that he's content. Oliveira's a physical beast. He just may not have been able to break the grip.
Folks and Dundas talked about that on their on the co-main event this last week, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know that it's not necessarily that Nunes didn't know what to do. It's like he just gave up as soon as Oliveira got him down for the last time. He was like, okay, well, I guess there are things that I could do here, but I think he's just got me, so we might as well call it a night. Like, and I think that's kind of the end of KJ Nunes, as anything resembling like a competitive fighter in the UFC right there. But I mean, but that was not something. That kind of finishing instinct on the ground has not been like a huge part of Oliveira's game in the past. We've seen the slams from him before. He's always had those kind of high amplitude slams, but like he hasn't done much with them in the past. This time, it was nice to see him immediately look to go to the back and finish. When, as it turned out, like I thought that it would be much closer to an even matchup on the feet, and Nunes was kind of taking him apart a little bit. I don't know if that's overrating Oliveira or underrating Nunes, probably some combination of the two. But the second that he got his hands on Nunes, the fight was more or less over.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing at play there is really that like Oliveira, even with the fact that he's come in with a Muay Thai background of some, to some degree, has really not been training any martial arts for long at all. Like he was apparently plucked off a farm in Brazil when he decided like when he took some local like sign up to fight if you want fight event kind of thing, and somebody there who was like part of a bigger camp saw him, was like, hey, this guy could be pretty good, and brought him in to start training, and that was maybe a few years ago. So Oliveira is an incredibly raw fighter still, but what we're seeing is somebody who's a really good athlete and who's smart enough to know when and where to put that athleticism to good use. I mean, that was really the thing we saw there, was that I mean, Nunes has had the faster, more technical hands out there, so it's just like, well, I'll take him down and submit him. Like, I'm the better athlete, I can win that way. And I think that was a really good sign.
Yeah, there are a few fighters for whom the word instincts applies better than I think they do to Oliveira. Like, he just seems to have a very good idea of what he's doing at all times and why he's doing it. And we highlighted that when we talked about him last week, and we talked about the kind of organic nature of his striking and the way that he just sees what's going on and then attempts to respond to it. Even if his response does not necessarily work out, you can see the thought process, and the thought process is sound. Like, so that's just kind of an interesting thing, and maybe we should explore that topic in more depth when we don't have a week of fights to deal with. Is just, who comes to mind when we think about really great instincts, and what do we mean when we talk about that?
Yeah. So the last guy here, Tom Breeze, I think the big thing for me that I saw is that when you're as big as he is and you're with a camp that's putting together some like basic technical striking skills, like you don't have to do that. You don't have to land that much or that hard to put some real power in your strikes.
Yeah. Tom, you got thoughts?
It was fantastic to see Breeze get in there. I mean, he'd been out. How long had Breeze been? Breeze hadn't fought in quite a while, if I recall correctly.
He had fought once recently going into this fight, but he'd been out for a while before it.
He fought in November, and then it was like he hadn't fought in he basically took all of 2013 off and most of 2014 off. So to see him get in there and just he physically looked huge. And his striking looked much sharper than it had in previous fights. I think the time at TriStars already paying obvious dividends, and then his clinch striking game. There was a big uptick in his ability to fight in the clinch. I mean, in previous fights, he kind of looked kind of like a Joe Lozon type. Like he wanted to just fight his way inside ugly and then get you down to the ground by hook or by crook, and then go to submit you. And I mean, this looked like a guy, like a complete mixed martial artist, ready to beat the hell out of you, no matter where the fight went. So I mean, he was. I mean, I think we both tagged him as a good athlete. Hadn't been super active recently when we scouted him, but the level to which he's picking up skills makes me think that he could be a pretty phenomenal fighter down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty shocking to me watching him. Very rare to see a guy who's that big and that tall with that much snap on their punches. Like, that seems like we see a lot of guys who are really long. Like take Neil Magny, who's about the same size as Tom Breeze is, and Magny's got some pop in his shots, but it doesn't have Magny's shots don't have that kind of visible snap to them. Like Nate Diaz has real snap to his shots. Who's another big tall guy with a lot of snap? Like Luke Rockhold has snap to his shots. And actually, I think Rockhold may be the best kind of comparison for what Breeze could look like if he reaches kind of the top end of his upside, because big, strong southpaw, actually at his best in the clinch and not really at range, but he's got real power in his hands. Excellent athlete. Slick top game, submission hunter on the mat, but yeah, I mean, I think that he could legitimately be that kind of talent. I mean, of course, welterweight is a much more stacked division than middleweight is, so those kinds of skill sets might not carry him quite as far, but tremendous potential.
Yeah. So The next guy I want to talk about a little is Darren Till, because he really did put on a pretty good fight, performed well, but like in some ways, he did great, so I can't take anything from him. But it definitely felt like one of those fights where suddenly what something we've talked about a lot before came into play, which is toughness. And just some guys are not tough enough to be in the UFC. And Wendell Oliveira looks like he's one of those guys. And Darren Till, on the flip side, is somebody who is definitely he's tough enough to be there.
Yeah, the durability thing. It's like there are so many dudes running around the regionals who have all of the skills and just don't have and just can't take that extra level of shot necessary to get to that point. Like Max Nunes has all the skills to be a UFC fighter. The guy that Hakeem Dawodu fought in his last outing is extremely skilled. His name's Tristan Johnson. I would imagine we'll talk about Dawodu a little bit later. Tristan Johnson is a wonderfully skilled and athletic fighter who just is not durable enough to take those kinds of shots. I mean, we could go on and on and on with.
Well, Tira Khorassani is like the classic case. Like he's a good, skilled fighter, and he just got knocked out constantly in the UFC.
Yeah, there are a lot of these dudes. Papi Abedi, another one.
Yep.
Fantastically skilled in just about everything that he did, and very, very little ability to take shots. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right. Like, from a skills perspective, Marquez probably should have won that, but then the second that Till started landing hard shots on him, the fight was more or less over. But, it was nice to see that. We haven't really seen an aggressive kind of attacking top game from Till before, so he's clearly getting better. I think I'm still a little underwhelmed by him on the feet, to be honest. Like, he just doesn't throw very much.
Yeah, I think the thing with Till, that I kind of immediately, that fight, he struggled early on when kind of like the energy was running high in the fight, and when they were in the clinch, he was getting controlled pretty easily.
Yeah.
And really, what changed it was when he was able to kind of break out from the clinch and then use his kicks to kind of establish range and then slow the fight down. Like he needed the fight to be at a very, very slow pace, and he throws those kicks like. If I'm recalling correctly, there's not a ton of setup. He just kind of throws
setup. No.
Like there's no setup, there's no combinations. It's single shot, single shot, single shot. And yeah, he kicks really, really hard. But I'm not super impressed. I think this is one of those performances where people will get high on Darren Till, and then he's going to get kind of brought back down to earth when there's someone who's going to take advantage of all these things. Though his wrestling looked. I was going to comment that his wrestling didn't look all that great, like his clinch fighting didn't look fantastic, and then in the second round he hits a counter Uchimata and like puts the dude on his back and then elbows his face in. So that happened. So I mean, obviously there are bits of his game that are improving, but I think there are still some problems there that are going to come home to roost at some point.
Well, like I said, I think the thing that we're going to see out of Till most likely is really that he may be actually a reasonable, especially if they don't give him a big bump up in competition, he could be a reasonably successful fighter just because he seems to be fit. Like he even what I've seen of him regionally, he's a guy who can finish late, who can go 3 or 4 rounds well, and he's tough. And so he may not be the most technically skilled fighter out there, but he's fit and he's tough and he's going to hang around and he's probably going to do better later than a lot of the fighters he's going to face at the bottom end of the UFC. So it'll be interesting to see if that carries him or, if somebody else can just knock him out and find his chin when he keeps not setting up his kicks.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I think it highlights, Till highlights kind of a problem with playing a pure Thai style game at range in the UFC, where at the higher levels of MMA, you need to throw more volume than that, and the way that Thais get around that is by diving into the clinch, where then you get your volume going, you get your knees going, and you get your elbows going, and all of that good stuff. And Till really does not have that part of his game very well developed in any
He's
sort
not
of
a clinch fighter at all.
Yeah. So So if you can get him, if you can kind of shrink his effective range, if instead of allowing him to stand at kicking distance, you force him to fight in the pocket, then you're going to be able to get your counters counters off, because it's not like he pulls his head offline.
No.
It's not like he keeps a tight guard while he's kicking. Like, he is there to be hit while he does that, but because he's long and because he's got good timing on them, like he's got a really good sense for when you've got your weight down and where your weight is, so he knows when it's more or less safe to kick. Like, so, but if you shrink his distance, it makes it harder for him to do that. Like, yeah, I'm with you. It'll be really interesting to see what happens with him, because he's got such a kind of a weird set of skills.
Yeah, it's a very limited particular skill set, but the fact that he has the toughness and the cardio could mean that he does a lot. He could be one of those frustrating fighters that you're always like, oh, this guy never. I don't like what he's doing out there, but he's gonna make it work, and just kind of maddening, you know.
Yeah.
The John Moraga effect.
That's true. That is very true.
So at that point, let's talk a bit about Nicholas Dalby, because this was very much a, like, all the good, all the bad on stark display from Nicholas Dalby.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the big lesson to me here was, if you just stand your ground and throw at Dalby, he's not a guy who knows what to do really in the pocket. Like, he's game. He's super game, right? Like, almost too game for his own good. And he's tough also. I think that's a big thing that we learned about Dalby in this fight, is that he can take a shot and he's willing to hang in there. The problem is he does not really have the skills to operate as a pocket puncher. No. And so, and I think in that sense, we may have collectively underestimated how tough a matchup this was for him, because that's really, despite his capoeira nickname and like the spinning kicks that he'll throw from time to time, like, Dos Santos is really a pocket puncher. That is what he wants. That is what he wants to do, and he was able to give Dalby a lot of problems doing exactly that. With that said, the fact that Dalby's ancillary skills are to the point that they are, and he was able to hit what were frankly, like, by any objective measure, good technical takedowns, should give that. It kind of raises my estimation of where Dalby could be as in the division.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where, like, the good side is that, yeah, he looks like a three-dimensional fighter with real skills in all areas, but the raw physicality to, like, get into the top 10 and, like, somebody like Tyron Woodley or somebody like that could do to him up there, like, there are major worries about him, like, breaking into the elite, just with, like, his willingness and ability to absorb damage in the pocket.
Yeah. I think I will say, for the positive for Dalby, the fact that his takedowns took another jump. Because, in the last two fights, he's shown jumps in his wrestling ability. Because in his last fight in Cage Warriors, he started offensively wrestling, and it wasn't phenomenal, but it was effective. And in this one, his offensive wrestling looked much better. The entries were cleaner. The finishes were cleaner. He hit one when he was tired. I would go out to say that I feel like Dalby faded in that third round. I think Capoeira kind of came on at the end of that fight, and Dalby kind of got that takedown, and you could kind of see the, like, oh, thank God I landed on top sort of feeling. Like, when you get into that, like, that clinch struggle with the guy, and you're just sitting there knowing, I need to end up on top because I am completely done. And if I land on the bottom, I am dead. And you kind of saw that from Dalby a little bit. I kind of felt like Pat hit it perfectly. Anytime they got in the pocket, you could see that Dalby was uncomfortable. And Capoeira started throwing strikes, and I feel like Dalby exchanged at times to earn the credibility there, but he was never comfortable there. He never liked being there. So I think that's something that he's going to have to address, because I think Zane hit it perfectly, that, like, at the upper levels of the division, I don't think his wrestling's necessarily going to be there against those top guys, and bad things are going to happen to him in the pocket. If you just look at where the top echelon of welterweight is right now, looking at the champion and the number 2 guy, high-level pocket striking is very much in vogue in the welterweight division. So it is something that he's going to have to address. But the improvement in his wrestling is a positive sign.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was. I mean, and part of that too is just that Zaleski he's a really good athlete. Like that's I think one of the big things that got underestimated with him too is just like he's got a shit ton of power and a lot of fast twitch muscle, and he can carry it reasonably late into a fight. He reminds me like a bit of Santiago Ponzinibbio in terms of like a guy that I know when I saw him first coming out and like up until his last fight even, I was just like, this is a guy that's never going to have regular success in the UFC because he's just too much of a brawler.
Mm-hmm.
But then you actually see like how, especially when Ponzinibbio fought Strickland, and just like how much better and more complete of an athlete he was than Strickland. And it's just like, okay, he's going to do all right.
Yeah, and Ponzinibbio is an interesting point of comparison. I think that's a really good point of comparison for Dos Santos. Similar games,
yeah,
similar physical tools, and like I'm still not sold that Ponzinibbio isn't actually going to be a really good fighter.
Yeah,
guy like that has plenty of time. Dos Santos, same deal. I think he's one of those dudes who could, if he's with the right team and he's making consistent improvements, he could end up being a legitimately good fighter, kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah, very, very much so. He's one of the, it's not every prospect is going to take a clean path and like go undefeated throughout their early career. And somebody like Dos Santos, sometimes if it's just like a wrestling game that you had none of when you started fighting and has been developing over 5 or 6 years, when it clicks, that could be a huge difference. I mean, it's kind of like what we're seeing with Francisco Rivera right now, where suddenly the wrestling has seemed like it's really starting to click, and the fact that he was just a fast trigger power puncher means a whole hell of a lot more now.
Mm-hmm.
So the other prospect we want to talk about was, well, to some extent, Eric Almeida maybe, but she really didn't show anything. Like, I don't know, Juliana Lima's, I honestly think Juliana Lima's John Fitch basically reincarnated, in that she's the kind of potentially top 5 strawweight that the UFC will stick on the prelims at every available opportunity and probably cut. That could be 2.
That's my point of comparison, because A, she's a little bit dirty.
Yep.
B, she's billed as a striker, but just isn't in no way, shape, or form somebody who is actually looking to strike in her fights. She wants to grind you up against the cage and take you down and kind of wear on you from top position. And I don't know. I mean, I saw Almeida's potential when we were watching film on her before she debuted, but that fight went exactly how I thought it would.
Yeah.
Every single thing about that.
Yep.
And the thing is that how many women in the strawweight division wrestle like Carneiro and grind the way she does? There really aren't many.
Yeah.
So it's not even a good point of comparison to be like, and here's how she'll look against, Beck Rawlings or something. It's like, that's not even close to the same fight,
Well, yeah. And when you wrestle like Almeida does, it's not going to go well for you, because that head and arm throw was awful.
Well, yeah, but like I say, is like, how many people is that not, like, how many women are there like Carneiro who can actually like have any, who are going to take advantage of that? Like, that division is still full of piss-poor wrestlers.
Yeah, but, like, I don't know. There's a whole thing in here about the women's strawweight division and shitty head and arm throws. Because, like, there are, like, 2 women's strawweights who hit a good head and arm throw, and that's Claudia Gadelha hits a nice head and arm throw from time to time, and Jessica Penne hits a nice head and arm throw. And they are not the only women's strawweights who try for head and arm throws on a regular basis. Many women's strawweights try for them on a regular basis, and they are almost invariably shitty. Like, Van Zandt has gotten her back taken in both of her UFC outings on shitty head and arm throws.
Yep.
Like, Beck Rawlings has a shitty head and arm throw that she likes to use. Like,
and Almeida's kind of takes the cake. Like, that attempt takes the cake for shitty head and arm throws in the strawweight division. But I mean, like, and Pat, as you said it, like, that fight went exactly how we all expected it to. Like, we all looked at her game and was like, this is a metagame fail waiting to happen. And there it was. Like, it happened. It was the perfect matchup, but also, like, there are other girls in the division that can do something similar to her. So
I
like,
don't know about that. See, that's the thing I don't know about, and that's the point that I don't agree with. Is I honestly think Carneiro is a pretty individual talent in that division. That there are very few women that replicate the way she fights.
you don't think Esparza could do?
Well, yeah, okay,
more
but
of this?
Esparza's
Yeah.
like with champion, you know.
Yeah.
You're talking literally like Esparza, Gadelia, and that's like who's a woman who's got a pretty good offensive wrestling game and a terrible defensive one from Canada, like the Iranian
Randa Marcos.
Randa Marcos.
Yeah.
Like Randa Marcos has a good offensive wrestling game, but her defensive wrestling game is every bit as bad.
Just like Omari Akhmedov.
Yes. So I don't know. Like that fight didn't tell me anything about Erica Almeida at all, unfortunately. Is I think my eventual point is that Carneiro is likely to rise up the ranks in that division with zero credit and then get totally shut out by the top couple fighters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I would bet that she gets in there with somebody like Esparza, and Esparza just rips her up with combination punching and eventually like takes her down and wears her out.
Yeah.
That's her likely career path.
Yep. So we already talked about Charles Oliveira a little. Did you want to add anything to that? Okay. Well, then let's jump ahead to this week, and let's start actually with some of the regional stuff. I just want to buzz through that really quick because a lot of the UFC stuff is sort of like we'll talk about it maybe, but there are only a handful of fighters I want to talk about on this UFC card. Maybe somebody else has more, but it's really not much. So first of all, let's talk about World Series of Fighting because if there are two exciting prospects fighting this week, it's on this World Series of Fighting card, which is actually tonight, and it's Hakeem Dawodu and Lance Palmer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Lance Palmer's obviously the one who's going to get like the push because he's a more established name and he's from a bigger camp like Team Alpha Male, and he hangs out and apparently sleeps naked with TJ Dillashaw because that's just stuff bros do. But I'm really excited to see Dawodu get back in there. I think he's a phenomenal athlete and already a pretty darn technical striker. There's a lot of little subtleties to his game that I really like, and to steal the term from Heavy Hands, he very much kind of fits the mold, at least in my eyes, as like the boxer puncher. Very, very confident in his power, very content to kind of hang around and wait for his perfect shot. Really nice, strong clinch striking game to go with his outside punching. He doesn't really have like much in the way of kicks. Really nice, clean punching though. And when he gets into the clinch, the knees and the elbows are coming. Biggest thing we haven't seen is really like ground fighting from him. Takedown defense looks solid, but he also hasn't like really fought any like big takedown guys. Most of his ground fighting seems to be pretty basic and based on disengagement. I'm really excited to see him together. I think the guy, who's the guy he's fighting?
He's fighting Chucka Willis.
Yeah, good athlete, like offense.
No. He's Palmer's fighting Horodecki.
No, we're talking about Hakeem Dawodu.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, offensive. Willis, offensive striker, but he likes flashy stuff, and like all of his fights are him overwhelming bad athletes with like aggression and athleticism and technique. So I expect Dawodu to just run roughshod over him.
Yeah, Pat had something else on his mind back there, so we apologize for.
Yeah, the first round of that Willis Dawodu fight is going to be really interesting because Willis is a physically talented guy and he's a good striker and he's actually got quite a bit of experience. I like his combination punching game. He takes nice angles. He throws a nice check hook, things like that. There's a lot to like about Willis, but at the end of the day, Dawodu is a legit Muay Thai stylist. Like he was scheduled for a fight in Lion Fight with Malapet Sasapra, like a super experienced Thai dude, and if memory serves correctly, like there was some talk that Dawodu would be the favorite in that fight. So take that as you will, but that should tell you a lot about exactly how Dawodu's striking kind of stacks up. And in MMA, like, he's just monstrous. He works at a great pace. He's got disgusting power. He's comfortable operating and countering in the pocket. He's a monster in the clinch. He throws awesome shots on breaks. He looks like if just purely in terms of his striking credentials, like, he would be a top 3 or top 4 striker in the UFC's featherweight division right now. I mean, he couldn't compete with the top 3 or 4 because he couldn't wrestle on that level yet, I don't think. But in terms of pure striking acumen, he is absolutely up there and ready to compete with guys like that. It's one of those things though where he trains at a smaller camp, and if it's not like he's getting bad instruction there because he's clearly getting better from fight to fight, and he's willing to shoot takedowns of his own from time to time. He doesn't really know what he's doing on the ground, but he knows enough to shoot takedowns and defend takedowns. It's not like his current camp is bad, but he could definitely be getting better instruction if he went to TriStar or someplace for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing out of Dawodu is it's the new baseline of what we should expect out of elite striking talents that go into MMA.
Mm-hmm.
It's guys that are going to go into MMA as pure strikers who, formerly would have been guys like Sam Stout or, what was his name? The Irish hand grenade.
Oh, Marcus Davis.
Marcus Davis, Sam Stout. Was it Andre? No, who was the? Oh yeah, Che Mills.
Mm-hmm.
Classically, the striking specialist in MMA was just this kind of kickboxer or boxer who maybe even had some wrestling, but their game was just totally disconnected. There were no parts of it that fit together. If they were striking and they were being successful, they could easily get planted on their ass. And if they were wrestling and being successful, they weren't striking.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're starting to see now are more of these guys who, they may not want to fight on the ground for any more than a few seconds, or, maybe if they've got top control and can be in the guard and posture up, they'll do that. But their focus is they are developing a reasonable level of takedown defense that is not going to be beat by somebody who can shoot it in on them at all. You have to actually work for takedowns against these guys, and it's just, I got that last tweet. Oh God. Okay, so it's just one of those things that is, I think we're seeing guys like Dawodu. I mean, it reminds me of Cody Garbrandt. Is another dude who's very much in this mold and who has more wrestling experience to his name, but still is somebody who 5 or 7 years ago, Cody Garbrandt is KJ Nunes. KJ Nunes is the Cody Garbrandt of the past. And it was KJ Nunes is boxing or he's getting taken down. And that was KJ Nunes. Cody Garbrandt is boxing and then he's almost impossible to keep down.
Yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of that has to do with athleticism and the level of striker that we're seeing transition at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You look at a guy like Dawodu, and if there were any money in kickboxing, he would probably still be a kickboxer, right?
Yeah.
Or if there were more of a kickboxing scene in Canada, Dawodu would probably still be a kickboxer. But that's something Dave Walsh and Stephen Wright and I talked about a few months ago on Stephen's podcast, and kind of followed up since then. It's Canadian kickboxers struggle to even find guys to spar with, much less to fight without having to travel just absurd, ridiculous distances. Especially Dawodu, who's in fucking Calgary, there's just nobody for them to train with or fight. So, or Shaolin Shane Campbell, who debuted against John Makdessi last month. Mm-hmm. There's just nowhere for these guys to go. So, Dawodu, if Dawodu were in Los Angeles or the Netherlands or Thailand or probably Australia, Dawodu would be a successful international level kickboxer. But instead, he's in Canada, and what we have in Canada is a shitload of MMA, and we're luckily the beneficiaries of that. A guy who could have been that level of kickboxing talent, instead we get the benefit of seeing him transition at a young age still, with a shit ton of athletic upside left. We get to see him as an MMA fighter instead.
Well, on the flip side of that, Palmer is a little ball of wrestling muscle who's just going to run through, what's his name, right? Hordesky.
Hordesky, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's I think all anybody needs to know. Palmer's, he's an elite prospect who's on his way up. His game's developing, but he's just a fire hydrant tank with like wrestling.
He's like a slightly less athletically gifted Chad Mendes, but a southpaw. He's actually a lot like Faber himself, except a southpaw.
Being a southpaw is a huge advantage. Like that can cover up for a lot. Like saying slightly less athletic but a southpaw, that's like evening the tables.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And he basically at this point has like gotten away. Like the fact that he's a southpaw has covered up some problems. Like the fact that he's 10 fights into his MMA career and has probably thrown a grand total of 3 strikes from the right side of his body. Like his game is all left hands and left kicks, and like he has thrown maybe like 2 pawing jabs in his like entire professional career. But really good entries, and then like a single double leg predicated takedown game, and if you let him get in on you, he will pick you up and slam you. And then it's a very similar ground game to Faber, like a less developed Faber ground game. We'll take the front headlock or we'll take your back. I feel like he puts a bit more pressure down than Faber. I feel like Faber's a lot more explosion and fast transitions, whereas Palmer is like that horrible pressure sort of. When he gets your back, Faber lets you move around and like slaps on the choke real quick, where Palmer like is the kind of guy that, like, in the gym probably, like, if he ever went with, like, the non-pro athletes, gets taps because, like, guys' lower backs can't take the pressure of him being on the, like, being in with his hooks in and stuff.
Yeah, that's actually kind of one of the interesting things about Alpha Male that I've noticed over the years, and with all their fighters, because, most of them are obviously really great wrestlers, but they seem to be a camp that puts almost no importance on long-term ground control. Like, they they get takedowns, and they are either moving towards strikes, moving towards a submission, or letting you get back up so that they can return and, like, rinse and repeat and go after it again and try to open up the opportunities again.
Yeah.
It's not a camp where, and like, yeah, obviously if they can get the back, then they'll ride you around like a backpack. But it's not a camp that's just like, I'm going to take you down and ride you for as long as I can from your guard or from half guard or whatever. I mean, Mendes may have done some of that early in his career, but the longer he goes, the more he's moved away to just, like, take you down. Either I get the sub, or I'm going to let you up and try to hit you on the way up and take you down again.
Yeah, and I would kind of categorize that. I have a project that's kind of been put on the back burner of, like, grappling archetypes in MMA, and I would categorize Team Alpha Male as kind of what I would call, like, sprint grapplers, where they very much like Palmer's like kind of the like perfect encapsulation of that, where he'll take you down and then he's happy to sit in your guard and punch you until you make a move. Like, and then when you make a move and you create the transition, he beats you to the punch. He beats you. He wins whatever race you're initiating. And other than that, he doesn't initiate so much as, like, once there's a transition or once there's a scramble, that's where he thrives. So you won't see, like, a methodical attempt to pass guard from Uriah Faber. You'll see him hit a dude in the face until the guy tries to stand back up. And then when that happens, he's on your neck, either from behind you on your back or on that guillotine, but he's all about waiting for that transition. And other than that, they're not super active grapplers.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and I think that that works for guys who have that level of takedown prowess, where it doesn't necessarily for guys who are going to struggle to get the takedown in the first place. Like a guy like Rafael Natal, right, whom we just saw fight a couple of weeks ago. Like, Natal is not the world's strongest wrestler. When he gets you down, he doesn't want to risk you getting back up because he's not sure if he can get you down again. Whereas Lance Palmer, four-time All-American, is not super concerned about being able to take you down again. Or Chad Mendez, like, not super concerned about being able to take you down again.
And the interesting thing where that kind of goes wrong is then maybe when you see a guy like Andre Fili, he's developing in that same archetype without the ability to just hit every takedown he goes for.
Yeah.
But even he is still like a well above average offensive wrestler. Like he is. Yeah, he doesn't like. I would say Fili doesn't quite have the positional, like the awareness of how to defend takedowns quite the same way, and that gets him in trouble. Is that he gets into these wrestling exchanges, hits a takedown, lets a guy back up, but then that guy is already in on his hips, and so then he has to waste a shitload of energy trying to get back up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It'll be interesting to see how Palmer evolves in it, because I think like you will see as he goes on probably less and less control wrestling, where he'll just hit you, take you down, let you up, take you down, let you up, and in those every time he's letting you up, he's hitting you or looking for the submission, because that tends to be how alpha male evolves their fight. It's like that's the style they want to push, and they almost all have it.
And they tend to, like, alpha male fighters don't tend to get tired in fights. They tend to have the energy to keep going for takedowns. And it's kind of a different, like, you have your guys who are, like, more of, like, the straight-up rinse-and-repeat wrestlers, like Khabib Nurmagomedov, who, like, quite literally lets you up just to slam you again. And then, hits you a couple times, and then when you get up, he slams you again. And then you get guys. It's an interesting spectrum, because then you get Cain Velasquez, who takes you down and just makes you work for every second of trying to stand back up. Whereas the alpha male guys, they've got the energy and they just want to try to find that perfect opportunity to end the fight. They're not playing necessarily a tritive game. It is a tritive because you do have to work very hard to get out from under them, but it's very much like creating opportunities to end the fight in a moment.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Palmer evolves that. So, other couple fighters to watch. Pavel Vitruk, a pretty damn good featherweight puncher, is fighting on the M1 show coming up. And Boston Salmon is a guy who's been getting a lot of press, and he's fighting on the RFA card. I don't know if we want to get too far into those before we move on to the UFC card tomorrow, but there are another couple of guys that fans should at least be watching out for this week.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Boston Salmon. I think he's going to go on and do big things. He's probably only got one or two more fights left before he gets a call up. As strange as that sounds, like he's fighting Danny Maness this weekend, of who Michael Chiavello turned into a widely known meme back in, I think that was Legacy a while back. So Boston Salmon is probably going to deal with him in violent fashion. But after that, I would imagine we get Salmon gets like another prospect on his way up, and then maybe he gets a UFC veteran or something to that effect afterwards. But he's not that far away from being ready. He's out of Extreme Couture. His striking is already there. His wrestling looks to be on point. His grappling looks to be exactly where you would want it to be for an elite level prospect. Like he's ready. He's there.
Yep, I would agree with all that, and I would add in that he throws some absolutely brutal elbows in close. The quick film study I did included quite a few fights that ended with guys like getting their jaws knocked off by an elbow, like on his way in to press them into the cage. Really fantastic fighter, and I think a guy we're going to be talking about down the road, both as a fighter and just in general, if his name is more akin to like a northeastern dish or like a weird pro wrestling submission.
Oh,
That was well played, dude. That was well played.
At least you didn't go with incredibly awkward sex act. That was the that's the other option.
All right.
And Pat's speechless.
Yeah, I literally have nothing to add to that.
Okay, so we got a UFC card to talk about for tomorrow. really the only fight and the only fighters that I'm super interested in on this card are Wade and Yagos and their fight. That's the one fight where I'm like really prospect wise jonesing over. Um, I honestly think I like Wade. I like him technically. I like a lot of parts of his game, but Yagos seems like the classic poison for what Wade does. Anybody have thoughts on who they're picking to win it?
I like Wade as a prospect. I think he's a really outstanding athlete. But his game is still kind of coming along. His striking game interests me because he does make use of and Pat can correct me. Is it called the crab? The kind of like the shoulder roll, like the one hand across the stomach and the other hand up here. He makes use of that, which I kind of feel is like this thing that's kind of coming on in the MMA world as like a viable defense, which I think we talked about last time. He's got a pretty strong clinch striking game, and I really like his feel for landing punches on like moving targets. Like he lands shots at times when I feel like most guys would be like just whiffing air as guys are like moving to get up or like breaking from the clinch. But like there's kind of like really chaotic moments. He tends to find his target, and he's got fairly decent head movement in the pocket. It's just I think Yagos is going to give him problems because Yagos will fight very similar to kind of like he'll be able to put Wade in the clinch, which I feel like while Wade strikes well in the clinch, it's not his preferred place to fight. And I think his last fight kind of showed that, where like it was this clinch-filled foul fest, and he really struggled for takedowns early on, and really what won him that fight. And I'm forgetting who Wade beat in that one, but like what pretty much
Zhang Li Peng, I believe.
Yeah, what pretty much won him that fight was his cardio. So I think Yagos gives him some really. I think Yagos gives him some problems, but I also don't think Yagos is like really super special. I think he's a solid fighter, but I don't think he's like a blue chipper the way Wade could be if he kind of figured out his game.
I don't know. I think that Wade is kind of a born and bred grinder, and he's really big and he's really strong. And the reason it's not that I don't think he's uncomfortable fighting in the clinch. I think he's really comfortable fighting in the clinch. I think it's that he was surprised by how willing Zhang Li Peng was to engage him there, and how willing Zhang Li Peng was to just repeatedly drive his knee into his groin. I think that kind of threw him off his game. Like I think Wade is one of those dudes where like we could see him take a massive step up in his striking at some point. He trains with dudes like Dennis Bermudez, and he trains at the like Long Island MMA.
Yep.
And they have good kickboxing coaches there. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Wade turned into a pretty decent striker. We haven't seen that yet though. And like Yagos has real holes in his game. He's kind of the classic like super athletic prospect who's still figuring out how to do actual shit. And so he does stupid athletic stuff in just about every fight. Like he's super fast and he's super explosive and he's super strong. And Wade is not that kind of athlete, I don't think. I don't think Wade is on that level.
Those are the athletes that have tended to give Wade trouble, too. I mean, Li Peng is not like a huge athlete in that respect, but that is Li Peng's game. He's the same kind of like, I'm an athletic dude who doesn't have any real skills, but I'm really, I'm strong and I'm tough. And then the guy that Wade actually lost to regionally, Ozzy Dugalubkov, is like the picture-perfect super athlete with no discernible talents.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that Yagos has actual talent too. I mean, I think that he's like he's got real power in his hands. He throws nice combinations. He throws a great flying knee. Like that he not just in the sense that it looks good technically, but he picks good spots to throw it. I actually know the dudes that Yagos trains with.
Yeah.
And it's not an awesome camp. It would be better if he spent more time down at King's or what have you. But like, it's a good camp. They're good coaches. They're good training partners. So he may not hit his full potential there, but he's very good. I'm pretty surprised by how well he's turned out. And good for him. I'm picking him here. I think that his athleticism is going to give Wade a lot of problems. times.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Wade is just that like he's fairly content to kickbox,
Mhm.
and he doesn't have any power there. And so when guys can like be the more powerful fighter, they can force him off of his kickboxing and into a almost entirely wrestling based game. And then once you're only trying to wrestle, it's hard to win fights. Like it is hard, way harder these days in MMA when you are just trying to wrestle and you're not an amazing technical wrestler who's just constantly chaining everything. Because
Yeah.
guys, they can predict it. They say, "Oh, you're gonna shoot. Okay, I can stop your shot and then punch you really hard off of it, and I can rinse and repeat that all day." And so,
And he's not going to be able. He's going to have a hard time with Yagos because Yagos is kind of like he's picked up. He's kind of picked up wrestling very very quickly, and he's really. I feel like Yagos has shown some big improvements since the Gilbert Burns fight. His last fight, Yagos looked really. I mean, the striking looked sharper, the wrestling looked sharper, the top game was nasty, and then he finished the fight with like a back take to an instant choke that was really really nice.
yeah,
He was a wrestler. Yagos was a wrestler in high school.
Oh, okay.
I think he was he may have actually been a state runner-up, which is not like a minor accomplishment in California.
Wade was also a really exceptional high school wrestler, I know too. So they both kind of have that base.
Yeah, but Wade went on to junior college, right? Like I think Wade was a junior college All-American.
Yeah. So it's one of those it's one of those fights that I think Wade, unless he really takes a step up, Giagos is like his bad matchup right now. So stylistically, you kind of have to pick Giagos, but who knows? They're young. It could turn out differently. Other than that, I suppose the other two kind of prospects who are really like in kind of a show me stage are Abreu and Akhmadov to some extent. Ricardo Abreu is like he's the prototypical BJJ guy that doesn't BJJ. So maybe I'm kind of thinking that his fight. Who's he fighting?
Jake Collier.
Jake Collier is going to force him to BJJ. So it'll really be a question of whether Abreu can BJJ well in the first round.
Yeah, I mean Abreu. So I scouted Collier for Abreu for this because my coach has my coach has been training Abreu for this fight while Cordero has been in and out doing other stuff. And basically Abreu's got about 8 minutes of cardio.
Yeah.
So if he can finish it inside of 8 minutes, then we're gonna think, that Abreu dude looks pretty good. He's huge. He's really strong. He's a specimen. He hits really fucking hard. But like outside of his actual work on the floor, his entire game is based on just being bigger and stronger and faster. So like that will probably work against Jake Collier because Collier is not especially athletic, and while he's like a willing and game combination striker who can wrestle a little bit, like Abreu is just on another level from him athletically and physically. So
yeah. It really is. It is one of those fights though where it's just like he either wins it in the first round and a half, or he loses it. And unfortunately, because I mean Collier is also the kind of guy who he may not be that great an athlete, and his game is really jumbled and disconnected, but he is aggressive everywhere, and he seems to have the fitness to actually like carry that on. Like, may not be a great athlete, but he'll be just the same sort of aggressive, sloppy, come at you with everything in round 3 that he was in round 1.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't have that much to add on Abreu, but absolute powerhouse in the clinch, but it's not really has anything to do with his technique. It is size and power. Not a particularly good offensive wrestler, and he's got a really stationary head. He gets countered. His last fight with Wagner Gomes, like he got countered a couple times, like really cleanly. But Abreu's just tough as hell. Like I don't think he ever looked hurt in that fight. Got hit clean a couple times and just absolutely shrugged it off. And his jiu-jitsu game showed as soon as they hit the ground with just like a picture-perfect transition to mount before he like knocked Gomes' face in. Like the Shogun Hua second fight with Lyoto Machida, where he just took that half second. I'm like, oh, this dude's hurt. I'm just going to make sure I slip into mount before I pound my fists into his face to just make extra sure he's not going to regain consciousness. And that's a good little like veteran move to see from a guy still kind of early in his career.
Yeah, Abreu has like the raw tools are there, but it's just like there's such a large building curve and learning curve. He's got the right fighter in front of him to do it, but he's got a lot to prove. Otherwise, I mean, we could talk about Akhmedov a bit. He's kind of, I don't know, the Dagestani that's not, I guess. Like, he's a really good athlete and a hell of a power puncher, but man, can he not wrestle.
Yeah. Well, he can wrestle offensively.
Yeah.
He shoots a fantastic double leg, in large part because he is such a physical specimen. Like, he's a ridiculously good athlete. Like, he's really fast and he's really hard and he's really strong. But he hits this beautiful driving double leg, but he doesn't have. It's not like he doesn't know how to defend takedowns. It's like he doesn't care, and then you're like, oh, he's like, I'm gonna keep doing whatever I'm doing, and then when you take me down, I'll just get right back up.
Yeah.
Which works okay when you're fighting some people, but then gets you in trouble when you fight Gunnar Nelson.
He reminds me a lot, in some ways, of Kamal Shalarus. We're just like big wrestling credentials, and then he gets in there, and the dude just loves throwing big, wide hooks, and doesn't give a crap if you shoot for a takedown on him. Like, has offensive wrestling, but doesn't mix it in like enough for it to be like a huge threat. Like, it's there,
or
but
maybe like how Yoel Romero fought for the early in his career before,
Yes.
but like a less technical, like very early Yoel Romero, when like some of the boxing was kind of there and there was the power, but other than him hitting that sweet ass ankle pick on that dude and turning him over, he really wasn't wrestling at all.
Yeah. It's just he's the proof. He's the guy I go to when I'm like, no, really, like, not all Dagestanis are like hot shit prospects for MMA. Like, there are a couple that are just guys, like good athletes, but like just a fighter, just a dude that's gonna like exist in like the mid-level to the lower mid-level of a division for a while.
Yeah, the thing is with Akhmedov, like, if he put actual effort into stuffing takedowns, he could be a top 50 fighter. Like, if he, like, to this point, he has successfully defended one takedown in the UFC. Of I think 8 takedowns shot on him. I think he has successfully defended one of them. So, I mean, with that said, the only guy who's actually succeeded in holding him down was Gunnar Nelson. So take that as you will. Like, it's not quite the problem that it might be, but like, you know, I'm picking Ebersol here simply because, like, if you tell me that a guy has successfully defended one takedown in 3 UFC fights and his opponent is Brian Ebersol, I'm going to go ahead and assume that Ebersol is just going to repeatedly take him down. But like, if Akhmedov actually starts paying attention to that and starts defending takedowns, he could easily be a really, really good fighter.
Yeah, I have a vision for some reason of Akhmedov landing one check hook in this fight and just crumbling Ebersol to dust. So I'm taking Akhmedov, but not for any good reason. I just think that sooner or later Ebersol's gonna stop working, and I don't mean like his style is gonna stop working, or I just mean him. Like, he's just gonna stop. It's just not gonna happen.
This fight
He's a fighter that's on like the perilous edge of functionality.
Yeah.
Well, he's been fighting for what, like 11 years, and he's got 60 some odd fights on his record. Like, and he's never been, and I don't think he's ever been cleanly knocked out.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, at some point that streak's going to get broken. I don't know if Akhmedov is the guy to do it, but on the other hand, yeah, it wouldn't at all surprise me if Akhmedov just put a 4-punch combination right on the button, and yeah, because Akhmedov will do that. Akhmedov will sit in the pocket and throw 6 or 7 punches at you at a time, which is not something we see very often at all in MMA.
And Ebersol's actually been fighting for 16 years. So.
Seriously?
Yeah, started in 2000.
Christ, that's a long tenure. That is a long tenure gentleman.
It is. It is Anderson Silva-like in only one distinct way. So yeah, Akhmedov is a guy like he is one of those fighters where things could just suddenly click and he could be way better. But I don't know. Who knows? I don't even know if he won this fight that would show that they had. Ebersol's just not somebody that I trust. He's just I trust him to frustrate the shit out of me, but that's about the end of it.
Trust him that fight's probably going to be good for a bathroom break if you need it.
Yeah. So the only other person to talk about is Brian Ortega, I think, and it's kind of hard to talk about somebody as a prospect right off a drug test failure.
What are you talking about? That is like peak MMA.
Yeah, especially when he's fighting somebody else who's failed the drug test for the same drug. So it's kind of like, who had the better pharmacist? Go fight and find out.
Yeah.
Was karma some way.
Yeah, well, here's the thing that I know about Ortega, is that if he wins, he will appear in his own Gracie breakdown of the fight.
Fantastic.
Because that's where he made his debut, was on the Gracie breakdown. Because he was like the purple belt that they just randomly bring in. And, so Ortega, like, as a dude that, trains with the Gracies, he's kind of what you'd expect. He's not really a wrestler in any, legitimate capacity. Has a really dangerous guard, really, nice teleporty back take sort of game. The one thing that, and I believe Pat highlighted this also in his preview, kind of showing, his, lineage of jiu-jitsu to some degree, is how eager he is to upkick from the guard. And that's something that, a lot of guard players don't use anymore, but, he makes it a big part of his game. So Ortega's a throwback jiu-jitsu player, and it worked for him last time because he kind of, if I'm remembering correctly, he jumped on the guy's back.
Yeah.
And got the choke, but I don't think it's going to play that well for him in the long run, and I don't know how long he's going to be around in the UFC, especially if he keeps failing drug tests, which he's a jiu-jitsu guy. It could totally happen that he just continues to fail drug test after drug test. So, but good athlete, and he could make the game work and be an entertaining fighter.
Yeah, he's you hit the nail on the head. He really doesn't wrestle very much. He's durable and he's game as a striker, right? He's very willing to engage you there. The problem is he's not particularly skilled. So if you're pretty much a pure grappler who doesn't really know how to wrestle, and you're not a threatening striker, that puts a pretty hard ceiling on you. And in this particular fight, it's hard to imagine a worse matchup for him than Thiago Tavares, who is going to be perfectly happy to play in Ortega's dangerous guard just because he's a rock-solid jiu-jitsu practitioner with a heavy as fuck base that's basically impossible to move, and posture that's really hard to break too. So I think that Tavares could easily just out-kickbox him for 3 rounds, or he could just be like, yeah, fuck it, let's do this thing from the top and just take him down and grind him out for 3 rounds. It's hard to imagine a guy who matches up worse, who's a worse matchup for Ortega than at this stage in his career than a dude like Tavares.
Yeah, the only question I have for Tavares is if Ortega could turn it into a firefight. Tavares is always the kind of guy who can get caught with one punch and suddenly be totally out of the game. So,
yeah, but it's not based on anything we've seen, it's not like Ortega's a power puncher,
No. Ortega has not shown himself to be any kind of power puncher whatsoever. So, yeah, I do think it's a pretty tough matchup for Ortega. He could have some promise as an exciting action grappler in the UFC, but that's a tough row to hoe in the UFC, being an action grappler. You have to be willing to really live by the sword, die by the sword, and have enough tools that you're going to win more often than you lose. Otherwise, you're Paul Sass. Yeah. And you win 2 or 3 fights, and then you lose 3 or 4 once everybody knows exactly what to watch out for, and you're gone.
Yep. Sounds about right.
So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. Other than that, I don't think there's really anybody to talk about. We could talk about Morales or Burchak or something, but God, I don't know. Burchak's he's a decent fighter, but he's pretty far along to be talking about as a.
Yeah, I mean, he and Soto are kind of in the same boat in that regard, in that they're okay, it's time to do this, or you're not going to be at that level ever. Like, these are the kinds of dudes who need to be fighting top 10 competition in like 3 fights, or it's just not ever gonna happen for them probably.
Yeah.
They're rare in that they're guys, and this was kind of true of Dalby too, but even Dalby wasn't that far along. These are the kinds of guys that the UFC used to sign all the time and now don't really exist anymore because of the way the prospect market has shaken out. That like UFC is just signing dudes when they're 1.5 to 3 years into their career instead of waiting until they're 4 or 5 years in with all of this experience and they've seen everything they need to see on the regional scene. Like, guys like this just don't exist really anymore.
Yeah, that actually made me really glad that Joe Soto did get a title shot as quick as he did. Like, not only did it end up being a pretty decent fight, but like seriously, like, you know, is Joe Soto going to get a title shot 3 years from now? Probably not.
No.
Like, this is the time. This is his time, and he's probably going to beat Anthony Burchak because he's just become a much more technical fighter everywhere, along with being a decent athlete. Whereas Burchak is just sort of the decent athlete.
Yep.
You know?
Decent athlete and pathological aggression will get you a long way in MMA, but yeah.
Not out of a heel hook.
That was, oh my god,
that was a phenomenal heel hook. Like that whole sequence was awesome.
It was awesome. But if you're Burchak, that's his only way to win the fight is a heel hook in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Why do you engage him? Like, why do you do that? That was just, God. Oh man.
On that note, though, I do hope that Entwistle wins like another 10 fight. Like, I want to see Entwistle keep winning that way, just because there's nothing more fun than a guy with a heel hook game who keeps winning fights.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
It's one of those things that like not a ton of like most guys' defense for heel hooks is to spin with it, turn, and limp leg out. Like that's 90% of MMA fighters' answers to that. And Entwistle's developed his heel hook game to have an answer for that. And then there's a large majority of MMA fighters who don't know what to do after that point.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite thing about the kind of turn, like spin and turn and limp leg out, and I still submit that this is the best UFC moment of 2015 is Derek Lewis just falling face first out of Ruan Potts' heel hook attempt. I think this was back in February or March. Like my personal favorite moment of the year. That's heel hook defense right there. That's it. Like you just got to fall face first and kind of trip out of it. That's your jam.
Yep, it's high level right there.
If that's not high level, I don't want to know what high level is.
So yeah, Burchak's, you know, it's a little, I don't know. It's interesting because he is basically in the kind of fights. Like, I actually think that Joe Soto, like, that's a good fight for him, but he's got to win these fights. Like, he's, you know, if we're talking about Anthony Burchak, you know, we're not talking necessarily. He could develop more, but it would be kind of late and surprising at some point. It becomes a little more like hitting a late peak. He's got a couple years here to make things click, but it really feels like he's still a very raw fighter in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I mean, that's almost like it's the upside and the downside of pathological aggression. I think we see like it's one of the things you really look for in a prospect is being really aggressive. But sometimes if a guy is really aggressive, they don't tend to learn other things because you can beat so many people just by being really aggressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
Anyway, if we had more time, we might go into that further, but we don't. We've already gone way over. So thanks again for joining us. I'm at DZaneSimon on Twitter. Tom is at TP_Grant on Twitter. Pat is at Patrick Wyman on Twitter. Sorry, Tom was distracting me with some shit that he wanted to talk about, but I totally forgot about it. And it's nothing we can't save for later. You know, give the video a like, subscribe to MMA Nation, check out Bloody Elbow, watch all sorts of other shit. Whatever you're gonna do, find Pat over on SureDog, all that good shit, and we'll see you next time.